Welcome to Bible Study Hub. We're in Acts chapter 24. We're going to finish this up, and we might even make it through Acts 25. I know we never go that fast, but tonight might be special. So just to kind of bring us into where we are, Paul, after his third missionary journey, got in big trouble in Jerusalem. He didn't do anything wrong. It's just people wanted him dead because of his gospel message about Jesus. So he got evacuated actually on horseback from Jerusalem to Caesarea, when they figured out through Paul's nephew that a whole bunch of men had decided they weren't going to eat or drink until they killed him. So they were going to ambush him, and he escapes by the grace of God to Caesarea. Well, he goes to the palace where the governor Felix lives, and he basically goes under house arrest. During this time, Jews show up to make their case against him in front of Felix. They even hire a Gentile lawyer who flatters Felix up one side, like butter him up and butter him up the other side, and then present like all lies. All the charges are completely fabricated, but they all carry the death penalty. So they're just throwing spaghetti against the wall, like something might stick here. But we're going to find out it really doesn't stick because it's so outrageous. The charges are so ridiculous. So tonight we're going to pick it up when Felix responds to the charges and the defense of Paul in Acts 24, 22, and 23. So Noel, if you don't mind reading that, I'm going to pull that up on my computer because I'm also not even there.
Yeah, I'll read Acts chapter 24. This is verses 22 and 23. It says, "But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, 'When Lysias the tribune comes down, I'll decide your case.' And then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs." I think this is interesting. Felix defers his decision until Claudius Lysias comes back. The issue with this is that we know he has zero plan or intention of bringing Claudius Lysias back. You'll remember it took 5 days between when Paul was evacuated and the Sanhedrin getting themselves to Caesarea for this trial. We're about to see, in the entire course of 2 years, a commander with a horse can't seem to make it to Caesarea to hear out this case and to see Paul. And so we have, it's pretty evident, Felix has no expectation or intention of bringing Claudius Lysias in for this situation. And I think it's interesting here. It says that Felix had a rather accurate knowledge of the way. And his wife was Jewish, and that probably had something to do with this. Philip the Evangelist lived in Caesarea, so he probably knew some of it from that. But if he did have a rather accurate knowledge of the way, it seems that he had every reason to know and believe that Paul was innocent. Would you agree with that, Mom?
Well, yeah, I mean, this isn't a stupid guy. He was evil, and history bears that out, that he was a terrible person.
Yes,
but
he was.
But he knows that they have no witnesses. Their accusations are really general. So whether he violated Jewish law or Roman law, the problem is that he didn't. He didn't do it.
Right. And
he knows that he didn't do it. So I guess what we'd love to ask you as a group tonight, Facebook friends, is under those circumstances, why didn't he just let Paul go? I mean, he's clearly innocent, and yet he keeps him under house arrest for 2 years with no plan. It's not like he goes, oh, well, I'll keep him for a little while, then we'll kind of, let him out the back door and tell him, run for your life. He has no plan on ever really letting this guy go. And I would love to know from you why you think that is. It seems like it would have been so easy to say to the Jews, I'm sorry, he's innocent. Your case is terrible. Tertullus, you're a terrible lawyer. You're an embarrassment to the bar association.
He got debarred after this.
Disbarred for that. So Emily says her answer is to keep the Jews happy. It seems to me, Emily, that you've been attending our Bible study for quite some time, and therefore you have excellent answers.
Dottie says the same thing, that he didn't want to upset the Jews. Margie says no idea, and I love that. Margie, I'm kind of with you because it's like, dude, what reason could you possibly have? Like, does it really matter what the Jews think so much? Like, I get your wife is, but besides that, do you really care that much? But the best guess, and I think you, Dottie and Emily, Price, spot on. He's afraid of the Jews. He wants to keep the Jews happy. And just because his wife was Jewish, he has a lot of understanding of this. He wants to keep all of them happy. Mom, just for those who haven't been with us so long, why is he so concerned about keeping the Jews happy? Roberta says he's afraid of what the Jews would do to him.
And she just nailed it. And Kim said basically the same thing, and also extremely good. So here's the thing. We've talked about this quite a few times, but if you're new or you're like me and you just forget things, this is the Pax Romana. Rome has conquered a lot of territory. It is not easy to keep all of this under control and keep it peaceful. So the governors are tasked, and the other rulers are tasked with keeping peace. This is like Rome is like, do not let anyone have a tantrum. I don't want any tantrums in the street. You kind of put it in those terms if you've ever raised a child, and all of a sudden it all comes clear. Like, it's not necessarily good for the child if the parent is really, really, really scared that they might have a tantrum. But that's kind of the situation that we're in. And so what ends up happening is the parent makes terrible decisions just to keep the peace, right? Just to make that child pacified. So you give them whatever they want, or you let them do whatever they want. We're kind of in that situation right now. So they know that the Jews cannot revolt, or they're the ones, the Romans are going to be the ones in trouble. This happened with Pilate. We talked way back in Luke that when Jesus was on trial, Pilate did not want to convict him. But he was afraid of the Jews, and he was on real thin ice at that time, if you remember, with Rome. He had already gotten in trouble like 2 or 3 different times because he had not handled situations with the Jews well. They knew it. They knew they had him backed into a corner. And so he ends up being like, okay, I'm going to have to let these people have what they want, or they will have a tantrum in the street, and then I'm the one in trouble. So that's exactly what's going on. And that's what pretty much all of you said. So you're right.
James sums it up nicely and says, the Jews would riot just like they did at the temple if he let him go. And so he just cannot upset Rome with a riot. I think that's spot on. I think that's spot on.
Perfect.
And Sandy also makes an interesting point where she says he's afraid that, Paul has so many followers, he's making a real difference. And then Karen says Felix wanted to protect Paul from the Jews. And I think those are both kind of interesting, maybe sub-premises here, of maybe some minor motivations that he has. What we're about to see is it appears that maybe Felix kind of liked Paul. Like, he didn't hate the guy. So it is possible that he does want to protect Paul from the Jews, or he's afraid that he's gonna, he's such a charismatic and interesting guy, he's gonna gain even more of a following. So I think all of those are really good points. Lori says, who wants a nagging wife?
Referring to Pilate, yeah.
Well, referring to Felix, because his wife was Jewish, and so maybe maybe she'd have an issue with this.
That's true. I was thinking of Pilate too, whose wife was like, "Don't do it, don't do it."
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she was on the opposite side, right? Oh, I love all those. So really this is where he's at. Felix is in a tough spot. He knows if he loses control of the Jews, he's in big trouble. Exile, death is on the table. So he just defers, and really what this is it's like he cuts a deal with the Sanhedrin to be like, obviously I can't convict this guy of anything under your law or my law, like there's just nothing here, so I'll keep him under house arrest. Are we good? And they're like, okay, fine, we'll deal with that for now. So it's, as far as immoral, horrible compromises go, it's one of the less awful ones, because Paul being under house arrest is a lot better than being in a dungeon. So this is optimal. Freedom's really limited. He's likely chained to a soldier at all times, but he's permitted to have friends and family around him. And so these visitors would bring him food, attend to all his needs. I'm sure they were just a huge encouragement to him as well. So he's safe from the murderous plots here. He could rest here. He could be refreshed by people like Philip the Evangelist here, who also lives in Caesarea. And I assume that Paul really enjoyed being chained to a guy all day that he could just minister to and evangelize to.
I'm sure there's going to be some soldiers in heaven because they got chained to Paul. I mean, I want to meet those guys and hear their story, Well, let's pick up in verse 24 and let's go to verse 27.
Yeah. I love this. We're still in Acts chapter 24. It says, after some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I'll summon you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison.
All right. So this is kind of amazing, just the squandered opportunity that we have going on here. So a little bit of a history behind this. History tells us that when Drusilla married Felix, he was not Jewish, so he had to agree to basically convert and be circumcised. Hats off to him at his age. So he probably had quite a bit of knowledge about Judaism and Christianity because he kind of had to do that whole conversion process. So he was curious to learn more about it. And I think what Paul spoke to him about is very interesting. Let's back up to verse 25 for a second. It says, and as he reasoned about three things here: righteousness, self-control, and the coming judgment. Remember how Noel talked last week about how history recorded this man, Felix. Tacitus, the historian, described him as cruel, licentious, and base. And we said licentious just means like completely without any sense of morality whatsoever on any possible level. So he was a really, really, really bad guy. Here's Paul. He's in this guy's house. I mean, he's under house arrest. This man could order his execution, presumably if he wanted to. All he'd have to do is agree with the trumped up charges and come up with a few witnesses, and they'd probably pull it off. I'm just thinking, if I'm Paul, what I'm going to be saying to the Lord is, I'm just going to sort of like soft pedal this one. Please don't make me be too frontal, okay, Lord, because I'm in a rough spot here. This guy can take me out. Not Paul. I mean, he goes right for the jugular. He goes right for it. He starts with righteousness, which presumably he talked about what God's standard is, which is perfection, which obviously Felix doesn't meet, nor do any of us. Then he goes to self-control. Noel, I think that is a really interesting one. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So going back to the history of who Felix is, we talked last week about how Felix, his whole life situation was not above board. And so when he's talking about self-control, he probably really directly confronts this sin in his life and the licentious behavior prior to that. I would say, without the Holy Spirit in your life, self-control is, first of all, not a natural instinct. And then second of all, very, very difficult, almost impossible. And there's really no significant reason to be self-controlled without Jesus Christ in your life. So it's interesting, kind of the order, right? Paul starts by talking about righteousness, what the standard is, how God intended for us to be, and how we have to be in order to have relationship with God, and how impossible that is. And then he moves to self-control, something that I'm sure Felix found impossible to attain because he doesn't have the Holy Spirit in his life. One of the marks, just interestingly, of a false religious teacher is a lack of self-control in their personal lives. And you can take this to the bank. Their money, their sexual lives, alcohol use, drug use. I mean, all of these things are highly indicative of self-control, and self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit. So that indicates when you have the Spirit of God in your life, very active, very present, you necessarily demonstrate out of that self-control. I think that's really cool. Obviously, that's not who Felix is. And then Paul, who, let's say again, is a prisoner at this point in this guy's house, completely at his mercy, wraps this up with the coming judgment. He just goes straight for the topic of hell and God's wrath, which if I were like imprisoned by a guy, this is like not the line of discussion and conversation I'd be keen on having. This strikes me as risky. Paul doesn't shy away from it because he understands that this is such a present issue that if Felix doesn't understand this, he will be going to hell and he will be experiencing that coming judgment. And I'm just blown away by Paul's willingness to put his own life on the line. If there's even the semblance of a chance that Felix would come to know Jesus, that Felix could have eternal life, the boldness of this is extraordinary. I think Felix's reaction is also intriguing at the very least, if not a bit surprising. Felix is alarmed, and that's the word that my Bible has, but alarm doesn't quite capture the essence of what the original word in the Greek was, does it, Mom?
No, actually, it's the same root word we get our word phobia from. So
Phobia.
This is not just, he was like, oh, that's painful to hear.
Yeah, this wasn't a yikes moment.
He is phobia. He is terrified. He can't stop thinking about it. He's in trouble here. I think it's obvious why he had this reaction. Paul was very clear. This guy wasn't sitting and going, what do you really mean by that? He gets it.
Yeah.
He understands it. He knows that he is destined for the wrath of God if he doesn't repent. What's so unbelievable is that he doesn't repent. He doesn't exactly say no. See, I think this is where we can go wrong really, really easy. There are certain people that we know, maybe you were one at one time, who just say, absolutely not, do not talk to me about God. I don't believe in him. I don't want to know about him. And they shut it down. That's one reaction. But there's another reaction to the gospel that's just as devastating and maybe more so. And that is somebody who goes, wow, that makes sense. That is really something. I'm going to have to think about that. And then they think and think and think and think, and you talk to him again. Wow, I know I'm not there yet, but okay. So I understand that you can't just make a snap decision. You need to have all the information. I'm not saying that you should, but what I'm saying is every time you procrastinate, you put yourself in danger of never getting to the point where you do come to know Jesus Christ. It gets convenient and it gets easier the more you do it to just put it off and put it off and put it off. And I don't know if we have anyone watching our Bible study hub right now that is in that camp. If you are, I am begging you, please don't be a Felix, because as far as we know, Felix never did come around. History bears out that he probably did not. He knew it and he put it off too long, and then eventually he just died. I was having a conversation with a lady that I was riding in the car with a few weeks ago. We were going shopping and we were just talking about the Lord, and she was talking about a family member who had really said no, like not procrastinating, but just a flat out, don't talk to me about it. And you know, she was feeling sad, and I was sad for her. And I said, I guess it's just kind of impossible to understand why some people say no to Jesus when we ourselves have said yes to him. And she surprised me because she said, no, it's not. And I was like, oh, okay, I stand corrected. She said, no, it's not, because saying yes to Jesus means saying no to you.
Wow.
I was like, bingo. Why did I never actually put that together? She's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So Noelle, kind of wrap this little section up for us.
Yeah, Felix got the gospel from arguably the greatest, most prolific, most intelligent evangelist to ever live, aside from Jesus. He understood the message. He understood that saying yes to Jesus meant saying no to himself, and he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And unless he changed his mind later, we have no indication that he took that opportunity. And like we said last week, history has zero nice things to say about Felix. So at no point in his life after this is there any evidence of the Spirit. And I think that's devastating. What's also surprising is that he just keeps bringing Paul back to talk about this. And it does say that he's hoping for a bribe from Paul, which this is just fascinating to me. So you've got on one hand, this guy is so frightened, the word phobos, he's so terrified of this concept of the coming judgment. He understands this. So that's probably part of the motivation. And he's also just so carnal and so stuck in sin that he's like, this would be a great opportunity to get a bribe from this guy. what are you thinking? Does this guy strike you as somebody who's going to give you a bribe? Really? That part just makes no sense to me, because under what scenario does he imagine that this guy is going to give him a bribe? It's wild to me. You can see that the God's Spirit was moving, but Felix said no, and said no, and said no, and said no. And Felix had that choice, and that was his prerogative, but it's still really tough to see that. And it's just sad for Felix, since he had such a beautiful, clear opportunity in front of him. He, not long after this, he was succeeded by this guy named Porcius Festus, which, first of all, great name. This is wonderful. Porcius Festus. He's got a car in there, and he's festive about it. I love this guy. Porcius Festus succeeded Felix sometime like 55 to 60 AD, and he's described in history as a much better person than Felix. The thing I said to Mom, though, is like, come on, how you don't have to be all that great to be much better than Felix. Like, this isn't saying much about Porcius Festus. But I think the reason he replaced Felix is interesting. Mom, what's the story of this? How did we get here?
Yeah, well, I mean, Luke doesn't tell us, but historians way back do record something. So at some point during the 2 years that Felix was holding Paul prisoner, some Jews and Gentiles in the marketplace in Caesarea had it out with each other. This big brouhaha broke out. And obviously, that's a big no-no for Rome. So Felix ordered soldiers into the scene to regain order. But the soldiers overachieved. I guess they were just looking for people to just really take out. And really they did. They killed a lot of them. And most of them were Jewish. Just so happened, So the Jews really felt like this was completely unfair, that they had been targeted, that, it wasn't equitable because so many more Jews got killed than Romans. So they put in a formal complaint to Nero, and Nero got the complaint and said to Felix, "You're out," and took him out and put Festus in his place. So we're not making this stuff up. This is really what happened. So, Festus comes into this knowing, I'm only here because the last guy failed with his army. He wasn't clear enough or didn't have good enough control over his army to take care of this in a way that didn't upset the Jews so badly. So anyway, Festus leaves Paul in prison to appease the Jews. It's that same old story. Ella and I were saying tonight, it feels like Groundhog Day. Like we just keep on, it's the same thing over and over and over again. These Gentile rulers are just in a weird spot with the Jews, and they know it, and the Jews know it. And they're kind of like in this catch-22 where nothing can get done because everybody is kind of like positioning the next chess move. So that's kind of where we are. So you ready to go on to chapter 25, Noelle?
Oh, I would love to. That sounds like a blast.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right.
How about I just start by reading, should I just go through verse 5 to start us out?
Yeah, let's do it.
I love it. All right, I'm going to read chapter 25, 1 through 5. It says this: Now 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. The chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul, and they urged him, asking as a favor against Paul, that he summon him to Jerusalem, because, again, they were planning an ambush to kill him on the way. Festus replied that Paul was being kept at Caesarea, and that he himself intended to go there shortly. So, said he, let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there's anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him. Again, this is just it's so Groundhog Day. Once again, they've set up an ambush to try to execute Paul by tricking a ruler into bringing Paul into Jerusalem. And once again, that ruler, by the grace of God or just sheer intelligence, kind of has a sense of what they're doing and thwarts the plan, and so Paul is saved again. How many times should Paul have been killed at this point? Like, are we up to like 5 times that this has happened?
At least.
Over and over again. Festus doesn't take the bait. He tells them, no, you can make the journey to Caesarea and present your case there with me because I'm on my way. Let me go straight into 6 to 12. This will make sense. It says, after he stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. When he'd arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him that they could not prove. Paul argued in his defense. Neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me? Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there is nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go.
Wow. All right, so the Jews who want Paul dead, they're thwarted again, so they make the trip. I'm saying up to Caesarea. By the way, if you read the Bible, you'll notice that it's always like down to Caesarea and up to Jerusalem, which Caesarea is up here on the map and Jerusalem is down here on the map. So some people are like, wait, the Bible's wrong. It's not down to Caesarea, it would be up to Caesarea. They're not thinking elevation in terms of maps. Exactly. It's all on the ground, and Jerusalem is high and Caesarea is down by the coast. So they go down to Caesarea, even though they're technically going north. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Not in the notes. That's just a freebie. All right. So this is really starting to get very old. Luke really doesn't give us many details now because we've kind of been through this so many times. Festus tries to get Paul to go to Jerusalem and stand trial because he wants to get some brownie points with the Jews and he knows that they would love it. But Paul is not having it. He's just like, no, you are not. You are not passing the buck. We are not doing this in Jerusalem. He knows he's not going to get a fair trial and a fair verdict. And so because of that realization, Paul, he's smart. He's like, this isn't happening for me here, and I'm done. So I'm appealing to Caesar. It's kind of like saying I appeal to the Supreme Court. You know, I'm going to go to the highest level to try to get a fair trial here, to try to get a good verdict. So it's interesting that once again, in the providence of God, Paul's Roman citizenship basically saves his life. Without that Roman citizenship, Paul would have been dead so many times by now. I mean, he would have been scourged, probably would have died awful. Just right there. If he'd made it through that, he wouldn't be in Caesarea under house arrest. So I assume the Jews would have stoned him at that point. Here we have, I mean, if he'd made it through all that and he's here, he doesn't get to appeal to Caesar without Roman citizenship. So you can really see how God put him into the family he did at the time he did, with the Roman citizenship covering over him, because he had a plan for Paul's life. And we can get huge implications for our own lives too. Where you were born, who you were born to, the family you're brought up with, none of that is an accident. That is all in the providence of God. Well, Noah, let's read verse 13.
Let me just read 13. I want to introduce you to two new people in our story.
Yes.
You're gonna love these folks. Verse 13 of Acts chapter 25. Now when some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. You may ask yourself, who's Agrippa and Bernice? Oh, sweetheart, who are Agrippa and Bernice? This is, if you have children watching, this is the time for them to go to bed. Mom, talk us through Agrippa and Bernice.
All right. Well, Agrippa the second is who we're talking about. Herod Agrippa II is his full title. He is the son of Herod Agrippa the first, which you probably would have guessed. This is not Caesar. Caesar at this time is Nero. Right. So he's not appealing to Herod Agrippa. He's appealing to Nero. This is just one of the Herods in the Herodian dynasty. But I think what's really interesting is this woman, Bernice. Now, it sounds in the text like this is Herod Agrippa II's wife. And you'd be kind of right. The thing is, that's not all. She's also his sister. Oh, yes.
It feels like some terrible soap opera, right?
And like the worst reality TV ever.
Really bad writing came in, was like, what can we do here that would just really stir things up? Oh, this is Bernice, my wife. She's also my sister. Like, that's like the big reveal. And it's even worse than that, because she was widowed when her second husband, Herod, king of Chalcis, died in AD 48. And then from then on, she lived with her brother, as one does. And so then, in an effort to try to quiet rumors of incest between the two, Bernice married Polemo of Cilicia. That didn't last real long, and she left Polemo and returned back to Herod Agrippa II. And their incestuous relationship just became the top gossip, like front cover of all the trashy tabloids in Rome. And actually, Josephus, the historian, writes about this. It's just all a wreck. Of note, Agrippa II, Bernice, and Drusilla, who we just talked about, are all siblings, all full siblings, not step siblings, they're all siblings. It's a wreck. Just a very incestuous, gross situation going here. And they have come to pay respects to their new comrade, Festus. And Festus says, "These seem like upstanding, wise people. I shall ask them for advice," as Festus does. So let me read verses 14 to 16.
But what could possibly go wrong, right?
These seem like people who would give really sound advice, right? Love it. As they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There's a man left prisoner by Felix. And when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it was not the custom of the Romans to give up anyone before the accused met the accusers face to face and had the opportunity to make his defense concerning the charge laid against him." Note, Festus is following both Roman law and Jewish law here. Just an interesting statement. So
true.
what's the deal here? Why would Festus even go to these people?
This whole thing seems like it's just kind of like going on and on and on. We're trying to get through it kind of fast because it's
exhausting.
Here we go again. But here's Festus's problem. Paul has appealed to Caesar. To Caesar he shall go. But he can't just send this guy with nothing.
No.
Hey, Nero, meet Paul. He's here for a trial for which you have no idea, and I have no records.
We're going to try him for nothing. That'll be fun.
He's got to send something. And he knows from Felix that Felix in 2 years was not able to come up with a single charge against him that held any water at all. So he's got this guy. He can't. Okay, we're back to the same problem. He can't release him because the Jews will blow a gasket if he does. So that's not going to happen. But he can't send him to Nero either because he has no charges against him. And so he's like, there's got to be something here. There's got to be maybe some nuance of Jewish something or other that I can get this guy on and ship him off to be tried for. So this is why he's calling in Herod Agrippa II and his sister wife, literally, Bernice, because they have a much better grasp on Jewish things. So even though Agrippa II is really subordinate in rank to Festus, Festus is like, come on in, we'll put on the full court press, we're going to roll out the red carpet for you guys. I need help, and I think maybe you could help me.
Yeah. He has an interesting resume that makes, Agrippa II does, that makes him particularly well suited for this. He was actually part Jewish. And he'd grown up in the Herodian family, that Herodian dynasty, and they oversaw that specific part of the empire. So he had a reputation for sort of being the resident Roman expert on Jewish matters. Agrippa II was even the guy that Rome had given the authority to appoint the Jewish high priest. That authority was supposed to go to God, but Rome saw it fit to give it to this guy. So he had, from a political kind of a socio-political perspective, he had a pretty good grasp on all things Judaism and Rome together. So when Festus says that he told the Jews he'd not convict Paul without a proper trial, he's following Roman law, he's following Jewish law, not that the accusers care, but he's got this huge issue. He thinks maybe my boy Agrippa and Bernice, his lover sister, can pull this together. Let me read verses 17 through 19 because these two verses are fascinating. It's the first time we see just like a really accurate summary of the charges against Paul. So be looking for how this differs from what we've seen before. This is still Festus speaking. He says, "So when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. When the accusers stood up, they brought no charge in his case of such evils as I supposed. Rather, they had certain points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who was dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive."
Whoa.
Notice what this all boils down to. I mean, in the past we've been, Paul brought a Gentile into the temple. Paul's inciting riots and insurrections, all this stuff. For the first time, we actually get this boiled down to something true. The point of dissent here, the problem, is Jesus, ultimately. The Jews and Paul have one problem with each other, and that is, who is Jesus? Is he dead or alive? This is fascinating, Mom. I'm blown away that this is the first time we see this level of accuracy actually spoken about what it is. This is the first time we really get to the truth in this entire charade of trials and accusations.
I think what struck me is so interesting, and maybe it will strike you this way too, is immediately I could think of current even situations out there in our country and other countries that I'm aware of where, it's like the fingerprints of Satan are on this because accusations are being made against born again Bible believing Christians that are clearly just these trumped up charges. Like the real issue is that the person is a believer in Jesus, and that's the issue, but that's not the issue that's being kind of purported as the problem. It's something else.
The problem is not the problem.
Okay, so I see what's going on here because Satan's not creative. He just keeps recycling the same stuff over and over again. Maybe you have some ideas in your minds right now of some things that you're aware of along these lines as well. But I think it's just something to watch out for. And also to know there are times when we undergo persecution for just this bizarre stuff, this ridiculous stuff by people. I think it's good for us to remember this so that we can at least sit back and go, okay, I know from the Bible what Paul endured and what the real problem was. And I think that's what's happening to me right now too. So at least I know. That doesn't make it easier to swallow, doesn't make it any more fun, but at least I know that that's what's really up here. And I think it informs our prayers as well. As Jesus says, we are to pray for those who persecute us, right? And try to do us harm. So as we offer those prayers for those people, it informs our prayers that we need to be praying for their eyes to be open to the God of the universe and his love for them and his upcoming judgment if they don't come to know him and repent. So I just think that's really something that is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very now, it's very today, it's applicable to our lives. And as the Bible just is incredible at doing.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, the group, a question. It's what struck me as so surprising here. We've been through this so much. Why is it that the first person to correctly identify what the point of contention is this guy? Why is he the first one who has accurately said the issue is Jesus? Nobody else so far has been able to just cut away all the craziness and get down to the heart. Why was Festus able to identify that? Mom and I didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I'm throwing a curveball in here, but it just strikes me. I get Felix was kind of a crazy, super immoral guy, but he spent a ton of time with Paul. He had a Jewish wife. I mean, he's pretty well versed, and you don't see him get to the heart of the matter the way that Festus does after literally one hearing with this guy. He correctly identifies the problem. Nobody else has done that so far. Everybody else is still all hung up on, did he bring somebody, a Gentile into the temple? Is he an insurrectionist? Is he this? Is he that? And of all the people, Festus figures out what the issue is. I find that just so unlikely. I just find that so wild. Patricia notes, by the way, that the Bible is just as alive and relevant today as it was when Dr. Luke wrote it. And I love that.
Amen.
It's why this book is transcendent across time, across culture, across everything. Janet Carmen says, maybe just a fresh pair of eyes on this. That everybody else has just been so entrenched in it for so long, they just completely lost sight of everything. I've seen that happen for sure, as somebody comes in and just, they don't know anything. They don't have the context, and so they can kind of get to the heart of it. Bob says, possibly because it's all about power and the power of the Jewish leaders. It's a direct threat to their authority. So they don't want to confront what they really know is the truth. But Festus doesn't kind of have that same context at this point. Dottie says nothing else had worked against Paul at this point. Dottie brings up something interesting. She's saying, Festus is assuming, and accurately so, that these are smart, intelligent, bright men who are bringing these charges. All the other charges are bogus. There must be something here. And so he tosses away all that bogus and goes, nothing else worked here. What's really at the heart of this? I think that's very, very correct. Zara says maybe because he deals only in concrete, non-supernatural terms. So he's looking for basic facts, ironically, and has no skin in the game. So he's coming at this just so unemotional. It's like, let's just piece this apart and get to that base premise, like what Dottie's talking about. Nothing else worked. What's sort of the premise behind this? Mom, what's your thought?
Yeah, I love everything that you guys said. I also wonder if maybe the Jews, after a couple of years of this, had just come to the point where they're like, you know, we've been through this so many times. Let's just be upfront with our real problem. This is a new guy. I don't think he really understands Jewish stuff. Maybe he'll be kind of confused by it, but let's try this. Because I keep trying stuff that, you know, like I said, throwing spaghetti against the wall, maybe something will stick. So they're going to throw this against the wall, but this happens to be the actual truth. That's my thought. What about you, Noelle?
Yeah, I'm a little all over the place, but I do think that Festus was a very bright person and probably a pretty emotionally intelligent person. So with the assumption, I have nothing basis on, with the assumption that the accusers didn't outright come out and say it, I'm guessing that he saw these just fluff arguments and was like, this is weird. Like, there's something else going on here. The issue's not the issue. The problem's not the problem. And so when he really started digging, he was like, oh, there's really only one thing they disagree with. And this wouldn't have been difficult to do, given the fact that the whole thing that lit this up is when Paul is like in front of the Sanhedrin and cries out, you know, I'm on trial over the resurrection of the dead, and they lose it. That, and this happens, he mentions this again in front of Felix. So assuming he's reading the court transcripts, you know, I'm sure they had, he would have been like, okay, the moment that we have issues are when this guy brings up resurrection of the dead. So something else is going on here. Yeah, I agree with all this. Roberta just says maybe God revealed it to him. And I think that's probably a good response too, that the Lord was like, okay, we got to cut through this now. And Lori says, after Festus listened to Paul for a while, he realized that this threat was to his personal life, that this was like, this wasn't just against some law or something ambiguous, that this was about Paul. I agree with that. Let's finish up tonight. I want to just read for you verses 20 through 22 to wrap this up of Acts chapter 25. It says, and this is still Festus speaking, he says, being at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem and be tried there regarding them. But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I'd like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, you will hear him. I like that Agrippa is intrigued by this. He's like, ooh, this sounds fun, as though my life weren't already enough of a poorly written, low-budget soap opera. This sounds kind of like a good experience. Yeah, let's bring this guy in. I'd like to be part of this. I'd like to be part of this show.
Oh my goodness. Well, and what Festus is really asking him is, I need you to help me concoct a charge to take to Caesar on this guy.
Yeah.
And Agrippa's like, I'm all in, let's go. Let's see what this is.
All about
what's
this.
gonna
Are we going to do some immoral, wild stuff? Like, that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah,
You're
up
the right
alley.
guy.
But what's so interesting is that we just see God's providence here again in what man meant for evil. Like, I need you to help me concoct a bogus charge. God uses for good, because here's the thing. If Festus had done the right thing and said, this is wrong, Paul is not guilty and I'm going to let him go, he's a dead man. I mean, the Jews are going to kill him. So he's safe in this palace under house arrest. So Festus's miscarriage of justice in the end results in Paul's being protected, which I think is amazing. Noelle, if you don't mind, let's just finish off this chapter. I would so love to do.
Let's do it.
To 27. So we can say we did.
It's just so we can say we did a whole chapter in one session.
We never.
It's a record. Okay. Acts chapter 25, 23 through 27. So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death. And as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definite to write to my lord about him. Therefore, I've brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we've examined him, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him.
Well, there you go.
Beautifully
all right.
Stated, Festus. Beautifully stated.
So they enter with a great pomp and regalia. So there goes the red carpet. There's gold and there's purple, there's robes, there's crowns, there's
He's got
scepters.
The whole posse of the military behind him.
There's the golden rings. I mean, all this stuff. But there's something kind of interesting and a little bit ironic, Noelle, about all this pomp and circumstance. What is that? Goes back a little bit.
We didn't share this, but Agrippa II's father was a man by the name of, you guessed it, Agrippa I. And if you'll remember back in Acts chapter 12, this is the man who sat in front of the city and accepted the praise and the worship of the people as they cried out, the voice of a God and not of a man. This Herod Agrippa I, to remember, immediately was struck by an angel of the Lord and died by worms eating him from the inside out. Gross.
Yeah. And horrifying. His son would have been about 17 years old, Agrippa II, if you think about
Agrippa
17.
II would remember this situation. I assume your father being eaten by worms from the inside out after just suddenly would be a relatively memorable event. And
you can't unsee that, you know what I mean?
You didn't even see it, and I kind of can't unsee it. And yet, Agrippa II seems to have no squeamishness, no qualms whatsoever for taking this huge honor and all the royal trappings, all the while committing incest with his sister. This is just
no fear of God, huh?
Just have a little like self-awareness for a second. Let's look internal for a moment. Agrippa, my man. Is this wise? Does this jive with what history has? No. Just, it's an interesting side note, be self-aware. It's also stunning, after all the accusations and all the hearings from the past 2 years, Festus' main problem is that he has a man on trial for basically nothing, and he needs help coming up with something to send along to Caesar so that he doesn't make himself look like an inept fool. Yeah. This is such an unbelievable miscarriage of justice. This is so not how this should happen. Any of these people should have had the minute decency to point out the guy's innocent, we should let him go. But Festus, Agrippa II, Bernice, who was presumably there and participating, were just so evil that they're just mainly curious to have a show put on in front of them of what's our boy Paul gonna say today? This is an entertaining guy. This is a fun situation to put on our ball gowns. Like, let's enjoy this moment. No morality. No semblance of righteousness or any fear of God. And these are the sort of results that you end up getting when living this way. It was excellent. You all are
it.
brilliant. Your responses were so insightful. Thank you for joining. We love you. We'll see you back here same time, same place next week. You can find all the videos on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're on the Facebook page for the community and to interact with all these amazing people. We love you guys. Go out and make good decisions. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.